I'm going to. All right, I'm live. I'm going to fiddle around for a minute or two in case somebody wants to pop in while I'm live. Um, I've been meaning to do this for some time. It has to do with this. Supposedly, the tombstone of Marie de Blanchefort at Rennes-le-Château. I should have made it smaller, I guess. Supposedly, these Greek letters spell out et in Arcadia ego in Latin. Hi, Rodrigo. Good afternoon. Okay, Rennes-le-Château, where Father Saunière supposedly found some old parchments in the pedestal of the, I've forgotten the word, the stand where you lay the Bible. There's a word for that. Or maybe in the altar. And he took these parchments to Paris and suddenly became very wealthy. This was around a little before 1900 and a little after. And apparently, Saunière and his housekeeper lived in luxury after that, even though they lived in a small town. Rennes-le-Château was poor, and he suddenly remodeled his church at his own expense, built himself a magnificent home and a Magdala Tower after Mary Magdalene. Of course, the naysayers will tell you that he was selling indulgences, but they must have been mighty expensive indulgences because Saunière became the equivalent of what today would be a billionaire. Well, I know it's a mystery, but I'm not buying either of the drawings of Marie de Blanchefort's tomb. First, the headstone, the vertical standing stone, is gone. Nobody can check it. The oldest drawing of it is from 1905, which is sometime after Saunière found the, or supposedly found whatever he found. Let's see if I can get the date. Of course, they aren't giving me a date in this here article. Um, but it was in the 1890s when Saunière started digging up graves in his churchyard. He claimed that he was moving. Oh, hi, Oswald. He claims that he was reorganizing the cemetery at the church in Rennes. But why was he doing it in the middle of the night with his housekeeper? And why did they build a wall and an iron gate at Saunière's personal expense? Well, maybe he was digging for treasure, but we can't know that the standing headstone, which um, supposedly was on Marie de Blanchefort's grave, really looked like the drawings we have. or like the reproduction, which is in a museum. The thing is, you see, it is supposedly written in code. The first line ends with just the letter M, as in Marie, and the second line has ARIE, Marie, the rest of Marie's first name. That's weird, and I don't think it would have been done when she died in 1781, less than 10 years before Saunière became the poor pastor of an impoverished parish in southern France. That's ridiculous. And of course, it is claimed that it's written in code. Also, Marie de Blanchefort could not have buried any treasure. She was poor. She had, before the French Revolution, she had to sell, I'm sorry, 1781, 110 years. My brain's fried again. About 110 years before Saunière came in. But she had to sell most of her land just to pay her bills after her husband died. And when the French Revolution broke out, she had to flee to Spain. So the story goes that, well, she buried all her valuables. She didn't have valuables, she was poor. Now, perhaps some kind of treasure was buried in Rennes le Chateau, and they make a big deal out of another grave, a tomb, a granite box that's no longer there because the landowner got tired of people coming around and trying to find treasure. But it was featured in a painting by Poussin, which hung in, I believe, the Louvre in Paris. And supposedly it was inscribed with the words "Et in Arcadia ego," basically, and I am in Arcadia. Now, Arcadia is a sort of pagan version of the Garden of Eden, a Greek thing. And so, supposedly, the flat grave marker of Marie de Blanchefort had this. And supposedly it says, "Et in Arcadia ego," in Greek letters, but Latin words. Well, the stuff in the middle is straightforward Latin, and basically it says, "I rule again in a small room of the castle." Well, that could be a reflection of the fact that the new owners of Marie de Blanchefort's estate allowed her to live in a small room until her death. And let's see, checking the article. The Here we go. Her daughter Elizabeth inherited what was left, and when she returned to Rennes, her stewards, Michel Captier and Julie Avignon, allowed her to live in a bedroom until her death in 1820 at age 85. I'm sorry, apparently Facebook does not allow me to put links in the chat, which is a shame. Next time I'll try to put links in the description. But there's lots of articles all over the internet, and this one has a typo. It says she returned to Rennes in 1979. It's really 1799 after the French Revolution kind of died down and they were not beheading nobles anymore. Well, there's a couple of problems with this. First, there's this praecum. Yeah, it's Latin, and I won't tell you what it means because it's dirty. And so is the little image that looks like an octopus. P.S. People say it's Priory of Zion. Ah, maybe. But this is either a very clumsy, poorly made grave marker or an out and out fraud. We don't have the stone, all we have is drawings of it. I'm guessing that it's a fraud, and I'll tell you why. Gotta find my pen. At the bottom here, I can't. Oh, everything's backwards for me. Let's see. Okay. A-R-K, and then at top here, A-D-I-A is supposed to be Arcadia. There's a problem. Your supposed headstone says ARX. In Greek, Arcadia is spelled with a K, a kappan. This X is chi or ki or kai. See, it's an X. There it is. It's an X. Where's my freaking finger? X. The P is the Greek R, rho. But that isn't how you spell Arcadia. Let me put that down. I thought I could just bring up the file and show you my screen, but apparently I don't have a premium channel on YouTube. Anyway, arc with the X, the CH, means to rule, to govern. And it actually comes from an earlier Greek term that simply meant old or ancient, like archaeology. Uh, Oswald, it is to be confused with that. That's exactly what it means. And I'm not saying it's dirty. Okay, let's get some. Okay, Poussin's painting The Shepherds of Arcadia is central to the mystery. All these shepherds are pointing to a tomb etched with the words, Et in Arcadia ego. Well, that might be, but this supposed tombstone doesn't say Arcadia. And it's Greek. And it probably says something like, I rule peacefully. Probably in her grave, but it's probably a forgery. It I really don't believe anyone was that clumsy, awkward, and careless with her grave marker, and especially not with the standing stone that supposedly said something like, I don't remember the exact letters, but Marie is broken up like that. An M at the end of the first line, and then ARIE below it. Nobody would do that. As poor as she might be, she was of noble descent and good friends with the vicars and pastors of Ren, where she was supposedly buried. The official records don't say where she was buried, but it's reasonable to assume that she was buried at the church that Saunier took over. Arcadia. As long as we're here, let's do a little bit about what Arcadia was and why anybody would. Not Arcadia, California. Not Wikipedia, please. Oh, I hate Google. Arcadia, Greek myth. According to Greek mythology, Arcadia of Peloponnesus was the domain of Pan, a virgin wilderness home to the god of the forest and his court of dryads, nymphs, and other spirits of nature. By the way, that's the Peloponnesus named after Pelops, which is an interesting story in itself. Okay, I'm in GreekMythology.com. Blah, blah, blah. Pan is that little god who's like a donkey with a human torso, head, and arms, and he plays this pipe. It's sort of like an ancient harmonica. It was believed that it was a utopic place wherein human creatures dwelled. Hermes, the god of thievery and the messenger of the other gods, would be seen roaming in the area, in the region, while Atalanta, a mythical heroine who participated in the hunt for the Caledonian bear and managed to kill it, was the daughter of the king of Arcadia. Okay. Anyway, that's all they've got. Arcadia was a sort of Garden of Eden for the lesser gods. Shepherds of Arcadia? I don't know. It came to signify a sort of Elysium. You know, the Greeks hoped to go to the Elysian fields when they died instead of to Hades, the land of the dead. But I just don't believe in these grave markers. I don't believe they're the genuine grave markers of Marie de Blanchefort, and we won't know because the standing stone with Marie broken up like that no longer exists, and the grave marker that was lying flat on the ground was ground down so you can't find any writing on it anymore. It's just blank. Anyway, that's my take on it. How long have I been online? Almost 20 minutes. Any questions in the chat room? Let's see. Oh, arcade. Could arcade come from Arcadia? The original meaning is a covered passageway with arches. Well, I'm not sure. But the Roman word for arch, the Latin word was arc, A-R-C. We added the H in English because we have this thing called a soft C. Oh, guten Abend, Jonathan. Or actually, guten Nachmittag. I think that's how you say afternoon. It's still 10 till 3 here. Jonathan's across the world. He's 8 hours later. And probably wondering why I didn't join his YouTube. Well, I was kind of busy. Anyway, I should be pulling weeds. I have not been to Contact in the Desert. I'd like to go sometime. I guess it's just once a year. I might have a way in next year. I just cannot afford the cost of attending. There's no way to commute to it, it's too far. And, Indian Wells is like near Palm Springs, and I'm on a mountain good 40 miles away, and I can't afford the hotel, let alone the admission. But I might be able to get in as a helper for one of the vendors next year. I've heard a lot about this year's Contact in the Desert. Of course, George Norrie is always there. And let's see, they had Graham Hancock, David Wilcock. Um, I'm not good at names. I forget which is who, but they have the guy who claims to be the reincarnated Edgar Casey. I think that's David Wilcock, but I could be wrong. Hmm. Anyway, I've heard that it was really good. Oh, Linda Moulton Howe was there, and Jacques Vallée. It would be really fascinating to go there. Yes, I know Walter Bosley went there, and he is a friend of mine. We'll probably have lunch in the next couple of weeks, but he didn't know I wanted to go, and I never asked him. He just got in as a helper for Clyde Lewis of Ground Zero. By the way, I've been on Ground Zero twice. Most recently, I was on a Saturday night edition of Coast to Coast hosted by Jimmy Church, and I might get on his own show, Fade to Black, in the future. I have a firm invitation for Arc Midnight with John B. Wells. And I do a number of guest spots on people's podcasts. I don't care whether they're big time or small potatoes. If I have something to say and they want to hear it, that's fine. Um, yeah, C.W. Chanter was there, and Walter Bosley got to meet him. And let's see, there was oh, I can't, so bad at names. Um, Walter's friend who got him in. Um, I can't remember. It might come to me, it might not, or you might pop his name into the chat room. Well, I'd love to go to one of Clyde Lewis's parties, but I don't drink. Oh dear. Does Jimmy Church really eat blue chickens? Don't you know you'll get food poisoning from blue chicken? I don't go for the woo woo stuff, and I have my doubts about some of the whistleblowers. I think they start with a real story, but they add to it because they want to make it more fascinating and intriguing so they'll get more attention. I've had experiences, but I try not to exaggerate. Hang on while I get a drink of water. Okay. For example, when I was 6 years old, I saw a UFO. It was not a flying saucer. It was a glowing red, orange. Oh, I can allow your link. That's interesting. Oswald's link is held for review. Okay, it's an article about blue avians from Gaia. Okay, I know Oswald. He wouldn't give me a bad link. Iranian cherry juice must always be at hand when streaming. Well, I happen to like organic coconut water, and I have some. Let me get the coconut water and then tell you about my UFO. I always assumed that I had imagined it, or maybe I confused a dream with reality because I was only 6 years old in August of 1960. So I never talked about it. While, meanwhile, my older brother, who was 9 years old at the time, had been wondering himself. He had gotten a telescope for his birthday, and it was a pretty good one. He was looking at the planet Saturn through his telescope, and he let me look through the telescope, but I must have bumped it because I didn't see anything. Now, contrary to popular belief, you can actually catch a glimpse of Saturn and even Uranus under the right conditions with the naked eye. You might not recognize it for what it is. You might think it's another star, but you can see it. Anyway, that's how I know it was August of 1960 because that's when Steve got a telescope for his birthday. So it was just after dark, and we were out in the backyard with Steve's telescope and this glowing red orange ball, a globe, round, came down from the sky over the back fence. And apparently, Mom had been calling us to come in for some time, but we didn't notice. So when we did go, finally hear her and go inside, she wouldn't let us tell her what we had seen. Now, looking back, I think it was probably a projection and not a real object. But that's my UFO experience. I had another one in the 90s. I think it must have been 96 or 7, but it wasn't exactly a UFO. It was sunset, it was dark, and I was coming up the mountain toward Crestline in my car, coming home from work. So it had to be at least 9 at night because I taught night classes. And I saw a small aircraft barely higher than the 150-foot cedar trees. So I pulled over to watch it because I didn't hear any sound. And I put down all the car windows and shut off the engine and sat there. And it wasn't far from me, not more than 200 yards, and I couldn't hear a thing. And this aircraft, whatever it was painted flat black, the way the Air Force paints things. And I was in a sweet spot where Aircraft could come from Norton Air Force Base to the east or March Air Force Base to the south. So I don't think it was an alien. I think it was some kind of silent craft that our Air Force had, maybe a drone, but a very big one. It was big enough to be a glider, but I don't believe you can fly gliders at night. And it would be very dangerous to have an unpowered glider, an unpowered aircraft, so close to mountains and trees and such. There's no landing strips. Here, they're all in Big Bear. There's a helicopter pad in Lake Arrowhead, but this was on the crest of the mountain, really in Cedar Pines Park, which is west of Crestline. I don't know, but it was ours, whatever it was. Oh, and there's one other time I saw some kind of jumbo jet, painted flat black the way the Air Force paints things, coming into land at McCarran Airport in Las Vegas. I was headed toward my son's house and I pulled over on Sunset, parked, shut off the engine, put all the windows down, couldn't hear a thing, which is weird because the Air Force doesn't have to comply with noise restrictions. When I was teaching English over at March Air Force Base, we were near the um, runway, and even with the big old sound wall between our building and the runway, it made a horrible noise whenever a jet took off or landed. No, Oswald, I haven't read Jung's book on UFOs, but I did read his introduction to the I Ching. I probably should read it. Phil, my husband, read it. Anyway, um, it was weird for an Air Force jet to be silent. And I watched it land and I never heard a thing. Maybe it was landing near the Janet Airlines that take people to Area 51. I think that's where it was. Anyway, it isn't spectacular or woo woo or, oh my God, they're aliens. I've never seen an alien. I saw what must have been a holographic um, film moving of a green alien with pointy ears and red claws, really, and white fangs. But it was some kind of projection, and I don't know that there really is such a thing. But the only people I've met who claim to be aliens look just like us. Oh, yes, Jonathan is an alien, but not that kind of alien. Anyway, I've never, well, aside from one 2 hour day trip to Mexicali when I was 14 years old, I've never left the country. Back then, you could just walk across the border, uh, both directions, as long as you didn't look Mexican. Then they'd check you out. In fact, I got stopped at the second border check north of San Diego once because my son had been to summer camp and he tans. I don't. I'm not even white. I'm transparent. Anyway, they did check him out. Fortunately, he had blonde hair and blue eyes because I didn't have his birth certificate. It never occurred to me because we didn't leave the country. He was at the Rawhide Ranch in Bonsall learning all about horses and cows and goats and stuff. That was really amazing, an amazing experience for him and for me to have a break. As a single parent, I really appreciated the opportunity to have him taken care of and happy for a week. That boy never let me get one night's sleep until he was a teenager and he wouldn't get up in the morning. Aha! Arcadia also refers to a vision of pastoralist utopia. Many of the first reported UFO sightings came from pastoralist settlers in Africa and Australia. Thank you, Oswald. I've forgotten your real name, but that's okay. You're here as Oswald, so you're Oswald. Um, I'm smoking too much and it costs too much money. On the other hand, I don't drink, I don't party, I almost never eat out, and when I do, it's usually with someone else paying. I don't go to the movies. I even skipped the Crestline Lioness party yesterday. It would have cost $26 for a plate of chicken cordon bleu. Well, someone didn't show up and said to give their dinner to me, so I got it this morning in a takeout box. I'm glad I didn't pay $26. Chicken cordon bleu has ham and Swiss cheese inside and hollandaise sauce on top. Not this chicken, it has ham inside and it's smothered in this sauce made of American cheese and chicken broth. It's disgusting. The cat won't eat it. I'm down to one cat, and she's feral. Most of the time, she won't come in at night, let alone during the day. She'll come in to eat something or demand treats, and then she leaves again. And if I don't leave a door open for her, she doesn't seem to care if she's outside, but if she's inside, she makes a ruckus. Uh, Switched from organic American spirits to Kentucky Select. Well, my cigarettes are Camel filters because I really can't afford American Spirit. It used to be Native American Spirit, and I certainly can't afford the Dunhills that come from England. Most of what you pay for those is tariffs, taxes. Anyway, for spirits, my choice is Courvoisier, a cognac. But if I'm out and I buy a drink at the bar, I get either red wine if they have something decent like a Pinot Noir, which they almost never do, or a fuzzy navel, which when I was young was a screwdriver with peach schnapps and a little Galliano. It's sort of a licorice flavor. But now it's just orange juice with peach schnapps, no vodka, no Galliano. So I asked them to put in a little grenadine, which is a pomegranate syrup. It kind of tastes like bubble gum, and it doesn't get me drunk as long as I have just one. Poor Jonathan is surrounded by marauding cats. Well, he is in a country where most people don't have pets, especially dogs. Anyway, let's see. Do I have any other? Oh, I have so many weird experiences. More than once, while growing up, I saw my brother walking down the hall, it, either toward or away from the bedroom when he wasn't there. The one time he was actually asleep in bed. Another time he was out in the living room talking to mom, but I saw him clear as day. It wasn't brightly lit, but it wasn't dark. I had the light on to read, and the hall light was on. Pomegranate juice, yeah, I don't know if it's good. The stuff I have, the only stuff I could get of grenadine, which is a thick pomegranate syrup. It has, unfortunately, corn syrup. I'll have to get someone to take me to Trader Joe's and see if they have something a little better. But I imagine with all the crud I've eaten all my life, a little corn syrup won't kill me. I laugh at people who freak out over the flu or the measles. I caught the measles about 2 years ago. When I sorry, when I came into contact with a woman who had been vaccinated 2 days before. Nobody told us we didn't have shots when I was growing up. I should have been immune, so the vaccine strain must be different from the wild measles that I had as a child. But in any case, I wasn't super ill. I had a little bit of a fever, about 99, and of course, an itchy red rash. But the biggest problem was that I ran out of Kleenex and started using napkins and ran out of those. It's pollen season, and I've been pulling weeds, which puts me even closer to the pollen. Anyway, when I was growing up, let's see, I had the polio, the shot, and the sugar cube. I had the uh, smallpox vaccine, which they don't give anymore. They got rid of smallpox. And I had what they called a DPT, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus. Pertussis is whooping cough, and it is not whooping cough. Whooping is whipping. It's whooping because when you cough with that disease, you sound like you're saying whoop, whoop, whoop. Those were my vaccinations: polio, smallpox, and DPT. I had measles, German measles, mumps, chickenpox, shingles, I said German measles, um, norovirus, which we called the Asian flu, nearly killed me. and scarlet fever. I was in my 40s when I got scarlet fever. Caught it from somebody's children. She thought they had measles, and I thought I was immune to measles. Turned out to be scarlet fever. I did have one day of really um, shaking, sweating fever, but when my fever broke, I was fine. I just knew that whether it was measles or whatever it was, I had to quarantine myself because I was staying with my parents and I didn't want old people to catch it. But I just stayed in my bed and I stocked up on bottled water and pink lemonade and stayed there. I didn't want to eat anyway. Wow. Well, they didn't have a measles vaccine when I was growing up. We just got the measles. I understand that some people die, but I want to see the studies of how many people get ill and die from the vaccine. It's probably comparable. I don't object to vaccines. I'm not anti vax. I do object to giving a 1 year old more shots than I had in my entire life. And by the way, I had the flu once in 1968, and I was not very ill. I was taking care of the rest of the family because they were ill. I was it. I was uh, cooking and cleaning and doing laundry. Oh God, how much laundry I had to do. They were incontinent, especially mom. They were sick as dogs, and I was walking around like, oh, I have a little tummy ache and a little bit of a cough. I went back to school probably sooner than I should have just to get away from all those sick people. I mean, it was funny. I don't get the flu. I got my DPT shot about a year ago because it was time for tetanus, and they don't give the plain tetanus shot anymore. You have to get the DPT. But I don't need a flu shot, and I am against unnecessary medical procedures. They're all after me about getting a mammogram and a pap smear, and I'm going, what for? I am not at risk for STDs or breast cancer. I know my family history, and I am, what do you call that? Celibate. Yeah. So, you know, why do something unnecessary and invasive? And by the way, pap smears in particular put you at risk for infection. Hospitals are full of germs. I did give in and get the colonoscopy because they told me they thought I had cancer or or perhaps a blockage or strangulation. So I gave in and got the colonoscopy. They found nothing, just a few polyps that they got rid of. It was interesting though. When I was younger and I had teeth, I had oral surgery a few times and they used pentothal or some related drug to put you under, and then that uh, ketamine so you wouldn't move. Now they just give you propofol, the stuff that killed Michael Jackson, but they don't overdo it. and it was a completely different experience. I thought I was having a good dream when I woke up, but actually I was hearing the people around me talking, and for some reason they were laughing and happy. Uh, anyway, nothing wrong with me. I just can't eat, can't sleep, can't do stuff, can't lift more than 10 pounds. And I keep getting shorter. I do have osteoporosis. Phil didn't try ketamine. They gave it to him when they put him under to extract a tooth. I don't I haven't mentioned Phil very often. Philip K. Dick, the science fiction writer that I married when I was young and foolish. And yes, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Hang on, I'll be right back. Okay. I kind of wonder sometimes whether Phil's oral surgery had something to do with his woo woo experiences. I never really believed in the woo woo stuff. And although Phil said that he did believe, I have my doubts. He had been so terrorized, harassed, and attacked without ever knowing who did it or why that he decided that whoever they were, his best strategy was to convince them that he was insane and therefore harmless. And he did a pretty good job of it. Uh huh. Darn thing went out already. That's one thing about camel filters. They don't have chemicals in the paper to make them burn faster. You know, those nasty chemicals. Anyway, I think I know, I still don't know who, but I do know why Phil was harassed. His troubles began before I met him. In 1971, he was harassed to the point where he fled the country and went to Canada. Didn't know why. Well, early in 1971, oh, how can I blank on that name? The LSD guy, Dr. Hmm, let me look it up. I'm really Timothy Leary. I don't need to look it up. Dr. Timothy Leary escaped from a minimum security prison in early 1971, and he had help. They knew that because he had changed clothes and left his orange jumpsuit in the restroom of a gas station near the prison. And they must have thought, oh, thank you, Oswald. They must have thought that Phil had helped him because Phil lived in Northern California, not too far from the prison, and because back in 1970, Phil had a telephone call from Timothy Leary. He never put it together, and I was young and naive and never thought to put it together until recently. Phil thought that he was being harassed because he had signed a petition in Ramparts magazine promising not to pay income taxes until the Vietnam War was ended. And I think that was 1968. But in 1970, while John Lennon and Yoko Ono were having a bed in Canada, I never remember, it might have been Ontario, but I'm not sure. But anyway, they were in Canada. Dr. Leary had visited them. I think he was like trying to avoid going to prison by going to Canada because there was that kerfuffle where he was in the same car with a 17-year-old girl who had some pot hidden in her bra. So he was charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Well, anyway, Phil, in his home in Marin County in San Rafael, California, just north of San Francisco Bay, he picks up the phone one day and the voice on the other line says, "Hi, I'm Dr. Timothy Leary." And Phil says, "Yeah, sure, you bet." But Leary managed to convince him and even got John Lennon on the phone. And according to Phil, John Lennon told him that the Beatles song, Paperback Writer, was about him, about Philip K. Dick. Now, Phil was poor, struggling, unknown, except in France. He survived on royalties from France, not on American US royalties. Although I suspect that his agent and publisher were both cheating him. More on that later. They would not have been tapping Phil's phone just because he signed a petition in Ramparts magazine, but they would be tapping John Lennon's phone, and they certainly would be tapping Timothy Leary's phone calls and recording them because Richard Nixon called Timothy Leary the most dangerous man in America. Ah, thank you, Oswald. Leary's son, Zach Leary, has a popular podcast called It's All Happening. Do you know which service it's on? Is it Blog Talk or um, Spreaker or something else? Anyway, I can look up It's All Happening when I get off the line. I've been on for almost an hour and I was just going to do 10 or 15 minutes. So, anyway, I think that's the real reason Phil was harassed. We both always said you don't have to be important, you only have to come to their attention. And they'll never forget you, but they won't remember why you came to their attention. I had a similar experience in Orange County when I was a victim and a witness in a crime. And the police remembered me and they thought they must have arrested me at some time. Jerks. I ended up leaving Orange County in a hurry with my teenage son because we were actually targeted, get this, by the Ku Klux Klan because one of their big high muckety mucks, who is also a Klan biker, uh, was the defendant. And by the way, I did testify, he did go to prison, and the court ordered him never to enter California again. He was from Ohio, and they sent him back to Ohio, where he Once he got out of prison, promptly got himself arrested again on unrelated charges, nothing to do with me. But I heard through the grapevine that the lowlife had military grade explosives in his garage. Nice guy. And the cops thought I was the criminal? I had witnessed him attacking the next door neighbors. My son also witnessed it. We were not victims, but we certainly were not perpetrators. We grabbed the phone and called 911. Turned out the guy had in laws and friends on the police force. I'm so glad we left there. I miss having my historic home in Old Town Orange with an orange tree that gave awesome navel oranges every Christmas. But hey, I'm on the mountain where I'm supposed to be. I had a series of dreams. And actually, I always wanted to live up here ever since I was 6 years old and got to visit my extended family's cabin in Running Springs. But as I was growing up, I had a series of dreams in which I lived in these mountains. So when my son discovered beautiful downtown Crestline, which isn't quite as high in elevation as Running Springs, I moved up here. And I've stayed here since most of the time since 94, with one brief sojourn with my parents when I was broke. I paid them rent. I didn't sponge off them. I was working two jobs and couldn't quite come up with the deposits to rent anything for myself. I had managed to get into a very cheap, rundown apartment, but there was too much crime going on, drugs and alcohol and all kinds of theft and burglary and stuff. Oh, they want me to um, show or hide Oswald's post. Oh gosh, I'll let it in. Well, I don't know. Oregon is ultra environmentalist, ultra liberal, high income taxes, but no sales tax. If I could, I would live in northern Nevada and shop in southern Oregon, but oh well. No income tax in Nevada, no sales tax in Oregon. Californians often retire in Oregon because they don't have income to be taxed in Oregon. Anyway, it's odd because in the mid 60s, my parents had connections to the KKK, the Minutemen, and some nameless organizations who were ultra right wing and prejudiced. But you know what? I remember On one Halloween, must have been 64 or 5, probably 6, it couldn't be 65. We moved. In 1964, in Culver City, a little town nestled between Los Angeles and Venice Beach, a grown black man came to the door and said, "Trick or treat." And Mom said, "You're kidding." And he said, "No." So she gave him some candy too. She wasn't, she was terribly prejudiced, but she wasn't mean. Strange, strangeness. But Mom was kind of psychotic. But that's another story. I've been on for well over an hour and I still need to stroll on down to the post office and mail some stuff. Trine Day Publishing. Should I know who they are? I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about it. Anyway, I seem to be down to 2 listeners. Not sure which ones they are. YouTube doesn't tell me. But I have 3 thumbs up, which is good. Oh, and by the way, YouTube says I now have 100 subscribers. Ah, Rodrigo, I guess Jonathan had to go. It's the middle of the night where he is. Some country back in the Middle East, I think. He also teaches English. 4 thumbs up? I've only had 3 people listening. Vieira. When I was a kid, I knew a family named Vieira. Midnight where Rodrigo is, so that must be, let's see. No, in Spain it would be 2 in the morning. No, 8 and 4 is 12. You must be in Spain. And you understand English. Portugal. And I'm glad you understand English. My high school Spanish won't get me through Portuguese. Well, the Vieira family that I knew when I was growing up were actually descended from the real family that Gone with the Wind was based on. Well, Rodrigo, I'm sure your English is much better than my Portuguese. I had the wonderful experience of teaching people from all over the world when I was a professor at Chapman College. I taught at the Air Force bases in this area, Norton and March and 29 Palms. We had, I remember, Chinese and Vietnamese and Japanese and people from the various areas of the Middle East, Jordan and um, Dubai and so forth. I didn't like the Saudi Arabians, never will like them. Only the rich Saudi Arabians get to come here for college, and they have an attitude, and they pay other people to write their papers for school. But that's okay because when they go home and they get their job, their assistants and secretaries do all the work and they just take each other to lunch and dinner. Well, some Chinese might do that, but yeah, they'll buy their papers. But I knew that and I encouraged them to write their own papers so they could learn better English. I was more interested in their thought processes than in perfect grammar. When you're in college, grammar is only a small part of your grade. Uh, I'm in California, West Coast, USA. Except I'm not on the coast. I'm on a mountain. California, Southern California especially, is a place where you can go fishing and skiing, lake fishing, I mean, and skiing in the same day, and then go to the beach, the ocean, in one day. You can also visit the desert if you want. We have everything here, but I love my mountain. Oh, interesting. 12 years, Jonathan. I taught for 12 years before I gave up. I was earning enough money to keep the car to drive to work, teaching at Chapman University. They became a university while I was teaching there. So my master's degree is worth the paper it's written on and nothing more. Oh, for watching. Well, Jonathan came back. Let's see. Somebody must simply not be chatting. If you aren't in chat, I don't get your name. So that's okay. If I don't leave in the next few minutes, I won't get to the post office in time. The outgoing mail leaves on the truck at 4:30, and I'm on foot. Lucas Sicardi. You came in at the tail end, but you can listen on the replay. It will be archived. Now it said 5 for a moment, so someone is being incognito. That's okay. Just listen and subscribe, please. I don't think I can ever monetize YouTube because, years ago now, the Google ad space canceled my account, never told me why, kept the lousy $20 I had earned. And of course, when you monetize YouTube, it's through Google Ad Space. So to heck with it, I won't monetize it. I just want to get out whatever message I've got. Oh, I'm the fourth? Oh, that figures. I forgot. I'm in chat. And I'm listening. Okay. I'm not really listening, I'm talking. Someday I'll have but if I do get 1,000 members, I can get an account where I can have guests call in, which would be something. I do have a Blog Talk Radio account where I could have guests, but because it's free, I'm allowed only half an hour. However, I do have a show on Freedomizer Radio, which is also through Blog Talk, and I have up to 3 hours on that one. So if you have amazing stories to tell, I can use Google Hangouts to have guests. Oh, that must be what Jonathan does. I was on his YouTube once recently. He seems to be on at least once a day. I don't know how to do Google Hangouts and link it to YouTube, but I think I can figure it out. Yeah, all right. Well, I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, it is really time to get going. What this is a legal document asking to be discharged from bankruptcy, and my lawyer kind of wants to get it. I've been in Chapter 13 bankruptcy for the past 5 years. All right, I'll try to figure out Hangouts and and if you connect with me on Facebook, I can send you a Google Hangouts link if you want to be on. I'm on Facebook as Tessa Dick, and I have a couple of groups and a page, Tessa Dick Author. But I gotta get going, and thank you all so much for listening. It's been a pleasure. Have a very good evening, morning, afternoon, and day.